just at my desk at the moment. I've got a lot of the plastics all cleaned up now and all ready to go back in the car. And there's a few bits that are broken. These have been repaired with some metal brackets before, but the brake's very, very clean, so I want to try and put them back together. I've already repaired this piece here, which you can't really see the repair, and I'm using this stuff. It's just plastic glue, and this should, the plastic seems to be the right kind, basically melt this edge of the plastic and bonds it back together chemically. So when I put that on there, you can see that's a very clean brake, so when that actually goes back together it should be nice and strong and you shouldn't see it. And that'll be nicer than putting it back together with lots of different bits of metal brackets. This middle bracket has actually got a piece missing. I don't have this piece that should be here. It should look like this one. There we go, all glued back together. It's very, very tricky to actually record it as I'm doing it, so the dropper on this one's a little bit annoying as well. But I need to set that aside so that can dry, but nice clean brake, it looks like it's glued together quite well. The other item I want to do is I've cleaned up the gear knob, which was actually much dirtier than it looked. All the numbers were all full of grime. But now that I've cleaned it out, there's no contrast, so I'm going to put some fresh paint in these numbers so you can see them. I'll see if I can do that on camera because it's quite a fun process. Right, so to put your numbers back in, if you've got an older style gear knob, or really any component that has recessed numbers like this, it's really easy to do. I would recommend not using Tipp-Ex because it just grabs onto dirt and it flakes off really easily. I'd also avoid enamel paints unless you want a slightly yellowed look after a month or so. I prefer to use more Citadel paint, and this one in particular is very good. And again, a Citadel brush, I'm just going to use a small, tell a light, this is a medium, and give the paint a good shake, which makes the most horrible noise in the world. And you don't need to be particularly tidy with this, which is just as well because it's very difficult to do through the camera. And you just blob the paint in all of the recesses, and the reason you don't need to be careful will become clear once I've got this all in. Maybe be a little bit more careful than I just was there. You might need to do a couple of coats when you do this, and just keep an eye on any sort of bubbles in the paint because they can spoil the finish a bit. The nice thing with this Citadel paint is it goes on just about anything. It's really not fussy. It doesn't yellow, it doesn't seem to bleach out. It lasts quite well. So once you've got your paint blobbed on like that, you then get a kitchen towel and just, you don't use a lot of pressure, just very lightly buff the surface, and just after one coat it looks that much better. So I'll set that aside and give it another maybe 3 coats, and I'll bring that back when that's all done. But that is literally how easy that is to do. So if you've got any bit of trim that you want to freshen up that's missing details or never had them, this is a great way to do that. A couple more coats of paint later and a bit of a clean up, and that's now nicely legible again. I didn't go round this recess on the insert because it's not even all the way around, and I have a feeling if I do that bit it's going to look odd. But I'm quite happy with that. You can actually see where your gears are a lot easier, and it just looks smarter and fresh. If you find that this is going dull over time, the easiest way to deal with it is just scrub it all clean and put some fresh paint in there. It doesn't take very long, and it's a very easy job to do. And you can do it on any sort of fixture or fitting or trim item that has a recess in it. And you don't just have to use white, you can use any colour you like. It can be a good way of personalising an interior on a car that has these sort of details. I'm going to try and fix this today. I've had a bit more advice on how to deal with this separation and the track on the back, so we'll take this apart, have a look, show you what's inside it and see if we can fix it. This is the clock out of the Maestro, and it's held into the dashboard with two screws that go in through these loops here. There's various different types of clocks that they used over the years. This one, I have no continuity across these tracks, so what I want to do is try and fix that. I've had a talk with some friends, and it's probably not the bulb holder, which tests okay. It's probably not the bulb, which again tests okay. It's probably the track itself and possibly some of the soldering. So to get to that, we need to get inside. The other thing I want to fix is this, which, as I understand it, the two pieces of glass that make up this piece are polarised in opposing directions, and where you see that half moon is where something, moisture or similar, has got in between the two. Considering how wet the car's been inside, that could be what that is. So, first thing is pop off that clip that holds the wire, and in these two dark holes are two tiny screws. Which I can't show you on camera, but they are in there. When you've got those, these clips on the side push in, and then you can lift that off. So that's the bit that you have the trim that goes over here, so you see the clock through this hole. And you've got the adjusters for time and date. So they push into a rubbery thing, and they're just a push fit job. And then that's your circuit board, and that's the clock itself. So, right, you've got your piece here. I can't remove this. Well, I could, but I'm not going to. It's held in with these pegs that are melted over, so I'm going to leave that where it is, and this bit of the bulb holder here solders on to these two black wires which run up to that point there, it looks like. And I think one of the issues might be the solder joints up here. I'm going to redo these bits here as well, clean up this track as best I can, check for continuity, and then pop that back in the car. I'm just basically going to clean everything. There's no obvious signs of damage apart from, you know, a bit of discoloration around here, a bit around here, so just clean it and see what happens. There's no obvious signs of really bad corrosion anywhere. I think this is just flux or something like that. I'm not an electrician, I don't really know. So the clock itself is very fiddly. Okay. So this is your block that goes on the circuit board there. And these little rubber spacer things go in the slots. I think they're just for damping. I don't think they actually do anything other than that. So just pop in there to keep those from going missing. Fiddly, fiddly, fiddly. This is what gives the colour to the LED, which is, as I understand it, these are sometimes red or orange, which is why in some of the Maestros and Montegos they're green, and in some of them they're red. I don't know what this piece is for. I just know it lives there, so it can stay there. And then this piece feels like two pieces of glass. And this is the piece that has the polarizing on it, which you can see that big half moon shape is where the polarizing has failed. So I don't know if this comes apart. I don't know if I can clean this up, so I'm going to have an investigation of this very carefully off camera, and I'll come back when I've done that. Short while later, I've had a look at how this is put together. Now, the advice I've been given is that the possible reason for the little half moon issue is that the polarizing filters, which are these jobbies, had come unstuck, or some moisture had got between, or something like that. So I know you can buy this in various sizes, so I thought I'd risk sacrificing these. They won't go back on, and I can always replace them if it turns out these are the problem. Now, I've taken both of them off and they're both fine. There was no lifting, these are actually glued on very well, but as you can see, polarizing filters are pretty awesome. So if you turn it through 90 degrees, it blocks it. And this is part of how the clock works. It just makes the display more visible than it is without. So with those off, I could rule that out, and then that allowed me to look at the clock itself. And this is the clock, just this piece of glass. You can just about see. Does it help with this silver bit? Not really. Trying to find something where you can actually see it, but it is very difficult to see with naked eye, and it's very difficult to see on the camera as well. But there's a little bit of ghosting on this piece of glass, and that's the circuit board, effectively, of the clock itself. Now, you can still see that half moon problem because that's inside this. I can't get these two pieces apart. They do seem to be bonded together, and I suspect what's happened is the bonding along this top edge here has failed, and it's allowed the glass to separate just a little bit, and whatever it is that's inside here, which I imagine again is to make the clock more visible, whatever that is, it's not sealed in properly, and that's just going to continue getting worse. So I think the only solution to fix this with this clock is to replace the whole unit, and I'm not actually going to bother trying to fix the one I've got. I don't have the skill to do this. I don't have the experience, and I'm not even sure you can fix that. So slightly disappointing, but it's not a vital part of the car. Got a new arrival in the post. Let's try this on here. Got another item in the post for the Maestro. It's something I was going to put off. I decided to bite the bullet and buy it anyway while I got the cash. So, this is the clock that I failed to repair. I think I probably made it worse, to be honest. And on eBay was listed one of these, which is, hopefully, a working brand new clock. This one seems to be the more difficult version to get. The other versions with a little digital display seem easier to get for the earlier cars, and it's exactly the same model as the one I already have. All I need to do is the little adjuster push rod extender thingies. I just need to swap those over. Before I do that, I'm going to test the new one, make sure it does actually work, because I don't know, and hopefully it lights up, tells the time, and is all good. So let's get that plugged in and see how it goes. So it's a straight plug-in swap, there's nothing special involved in that. And if you pop the ignition on, hooray, it lights up. And then turn the side lights on, and it dims, which is what you want. You do want the clock to dim when your lights are on, so it's not as obvious when you're driving along. Total success. I will get that installed properly, and it's nice when a fix is easy. All back together, and it's actually quite bright. The original one was actually quite dim even before I tried to fix it, so probably needed replacing anyway. One more little job out of the way. I've been waiting for parts to arrive for the car, and one of the things that's been hardest to find has been the correct trim clip stud things that hold the sill trims on. The original ones look like that, and it turns out that's the same as Peugeot Boxster, not Boxster, that's the Porsche, Peugeot Boxer, Fiat Doblo, you know, those just generic vans. The only trouble is I can't get them in the same colour as the Maestro. So I got the nearest thing I could find. These are a slightly different design, but they fit. The head on them is slightly smaller than the originals, but there's not much in it, and it does cover up the holes where it needs to, and they do fit where they need to, so I'll be fitting those. One of the other jobs was the steering column shroud. Now, I think I'd mentioned in a previous video I had found one online, but it was much too expensive. It was getting on for 40 quid, and I didn't want to pay that much for a piece of plastic, especially when it didn't come with any fixings, and I wasn't 100% sure it was the right one. So this is my old one. So we have an old one here, and it's got all kinds of damage on the pegs, unfortunately. They're broken from being over tightened, and I tried to repair it, but the repair didn't work. Doesn't always. Here's a very common problem with brittle plastic steering column shrouds. This is something that afflicts a lot of 80s and 90s cars, and Maestros are certainly not free of it as a problem. The plastic that the screws go through goes brittle, and if it's even slightly over tightened, it breaks off. Now, sometimes you get lucky and you've got all the bits to put it back together, and while I have most of them, I don't have all. So if you've got all the bits, like this little piece here goes onto that little socket there, and it's quite a nice clean break. I can't show you with one hand, but it's a nice clean break, so if it just breaks like that, you can actually put it back together. You just use some good strong epoxy. This one, I'm not sure which hole that goes to. There's a piece missing from this, and there's pieces missing from the various holes inside. So I can put what I've got back together, and I'm going to do that for now. The other thing that's probably caused the problem is the original screws are missing, and they've been replaced with, well, these, which are wrong. So when you screw them down, the heads on them tend to be the wrong size. It cracks the plastic, it breaks it, it's loose, so whoever's doing it tightens it up more and makes the problem worse. So
it didn't help either that I didn't know exactly how long the tubes needed to be for the screws. And then up popped a listing for a new old stock one. And this one has all of the bits and pieces in it that you need. It's in excellent condition, as you would expect. It is a slightly different design to mine. It's the same part number, but I think the design was changed to get around the issue with the broken studs that these suffer from. So I'll be fitting that one today, and got myself some new screws. I couldn't find what the original ones were supposed to be. I got the next best thing I could. So I'm going to get the steering column shroud fitted first, so then I've not got all these sharp bits jabbing me in the knees when I get in the car, and then we'll move on to the other bits of trim and get this all wrapped up. The problem with the old housing is these stalks snap off, and I've had a go at repairing it with some epoxy, and I tried various tubes. I couldn't get everything to line up properly. So I abandoned that one when I found the replacement. If I'd persisted, I probably could have got this right. Now, the main difference is on this one, that tube there, which is broken, is actually moulded in one piece. On the replacement one, the same tube is a removable section. So I've got a feeling one or the other is a redesign. So either this new one is a redesign to stop that happening, or this old one is a redesign to save money by making this a single piece. I don't know. So yeah, let's get that plonked in, and that will then mean I don't have all of this horror jabbing me anymore. That'll be nice. So when you fit this, it's in two halves, and they slot together. There's various different bits and pieces, and you just slide them on over the stalks. There shouldn't be any need to remove any trims. He says. Sometimes it's easier if you do one side first and then the other. That's a little foam pad at the top, probably to stop squeaking. I'm just getting hooked up on that. There we go. For a little bit of wiggling about. First one I did with this top one, which is this, just behind the hazard warning light, and you have to be careful because this all wants to break off as you line it up, but eventually it does all go in. The next one is down the side here. This is one you've got to be really careful of because there's the hole inside the tube actually narrows as you go down, so
as you tighten the screw, you do run the risk of snapping the tube open, which I think is what's happened on the old one. So when you tighten that one down, only do it as far as it needs to hold the plastic in place. Don't feel like you need to crank it all the way in. The next two, and that gap will close up as I get the side ones done. Next two are under here. This one on the passenger side, I think something was slightly misaligned because it pushed the plug out. So I'll just have to push that back in once I finish tightening the sides up, and then we should be good. This is the little plug that goes in the bottom, and it just push fits into a split piece of plastic in the trim, and it literally, so yeah, you just, so there's the slot, and that just clicks in like that, and then you can screw through into the screw hole behind. You can see that gap's already starting to close up there, so as I get everything tightened up, that will all fit properly. This is quite awkward to film because there's not a lot of space for me, let alone for the camera, but we're getting there. Minor mishap. I've managed to leave. I was having trouble getting everything fitting and I was a bit confused as to why. And just here, I'd left one of the screws in. This isn't the right kind of screw, this is just a wood screw. So I pulled one trim off and I realised it gives you opportunity to see where the fixings go. So the lower one, you can see the tube, I think. Yeah, you can see the plastic tube just there, and that's the screw coming through. And then your upper one, those removable ones, they go up here and they screw into the bit that holds your stalks. So if you're having trouble lining it up, it might be easier to take one side, probably the ignition side because it's the harder one to line up, pop that on first and then screw that in just to get these in place, and that should help guide this other side in. So that's what I'm going to do. And then at the top, the one screw behind the hazard warning light, that one lines up quite easily. It's not too difficult. But you do have to be aware of this bit of foam back here, which I think is an anti-squeak measure, because as you're pushing the trim together it tries to catch it and push it, and then you can't. So yeah, let's get the other half on. Last one to go in, which just drops in behind the hazard warning light. Never do anything up too tight, just until it's snug. The screws I used for this are just some button head screws, because these look like they were going to be the least trouble to install, and they seem to have gone quite well. They're quite long ones for the sides at the bottom, and then I say the sides. Quite long ones for the side ones, and then it's short ones for the top and bottom. But that's in. That looks much better.